So I'm here today at the Community Technology Leadership event with Scott Berkun, author of The Myths of Innovation. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
I know that you kind of wanted to start your presentation today by defining innovation, so maybe that would be a good place to start the interview.
Sure. Well, the first thing to say is I'm not a fan of the word at all. It's used so easily and so cheaply, and unfortunately, when people use the word a lot, they are not paying attention to what the word should mean. So the definition I offered today was significant positive change, because that depends on three things. One, significance, which means you have to go and look around and say, how are things are right now? How are we going to do something much larger than that or better than that? Two, positive. There's all kinds of change. Some are very negative for the balanced book, but also for customers. Then third, change, that you're going to make something different. So whenever I see people use the word innovation, I always say, what do you mean? What are you going to change? Are you sure it's going to be positive? And who's the change going to be for? For you, your stockholders, for your bank account, for who? And that helps people frame the conversation. Odds are greater that they'll actually do something good.
If you look at Drucker's definition, which is not that different,
No.
I mean, it's a little bit more general.
I'm not laying claim to that definition.
No.
Yeah.
But he talks about something of significant value to customers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one of the things that I see is that people confuse innovation in an academic environment of doing some great new technology with actually taking it to the marketplace. And of course, we've heard things about the challenge of taking technologies and taking them to the marketplace. So how does that fit into your definition?
Well, there's a whole bunch of variables that enter the conversation that people forget to talk about. There's many very good products that are not marketed well, and they are often labeled as not being innovative enough, when really the problem it had nothing to do with the product. It had to do with how is the product sold, how is it pitched, how is it messaged. There's a whole dimension of the history of innovation that has to do with not the technology, not even the quality of the product or how easy to use it was, but they failed to message it right. They could have messaged it better, but they didn't. And there are variables like this that come into play that affect which products or technologies are successful at all. There's a long history of technologies that people say it's before its time. It's before its time. And they like to discount the fact that somehow the person who invented the technology could have done something different to have made it succeed.
Now you've talked a lot about the challenges of creating innovative organizations and the cultural issues and the incentive issues and the recruitment issues. Can you maybe give some ideas on how organizations are designed and how that might make them more or less innovative? Because it's a big challenge for companies and they seem to get stuck.
It is. Well, when a company starts, it's a small group of people that know each other well, one would hope, and have a shared vision for what they're doing. And they want to take risks together. They're all fully invested in what's going on, and that's how companies start. That's how all companies start. Google, Microsoft, Apple, they all started that way. As a company gets successful, there's now revenue. And it becomes advantageous to have someone who's around to think about optimizing the revenue. How do we get 5% more, 10% more? Those tend to be people who are conservative. They want to protect the revenue streams that you already have. Once you're at a point where you're successful, to do anything good, significant positive change requires doing something different. People who are conservative are not good at doing something different. They're going to hold on to that as much as they can. So a challenge in any successful company is either introducing people who have not been around for a while, bringing in fresh blood, or finding ways to change the goal so it forces people to recognize that doing things that are different is what's desired rather than protecting the status quo. But it's very hard. Most people are very conservative. Most people who go to school are very conservative. They're making a bet that by spending money on a 4-year degree, they're going to get a return on that investment. In the grand scheme of how to spend 4 years, that's a conservative investment. They could choose to start their company. They could choose to try to start working when they're younger. So I think in general, people are conservative, and invention and discovery all require the opposite. And figuring out how to do that is often takes people to places that they're afraid to go.
So given that the challenges in big companies are about stimulating innovation, and innovation always has an aspect that some failure will happen, right? How do you kind of encourage that failure? Because you bring in these people from outside that you've just mentioned, and they become the agents of change. But if they are the agents of change, then they're going to have some failures, and then you kind of get the arrows in the back.
Yes.
How do you deal with that situation?
Well, there has to be a recognition that if ever you have ambitious goals, we can take innovation out of the equation completely. Our goals are big. We want 20% more revenue, 20% more growth. Those are big numbers. You have to recognize that anything that's that large can't be done all at once. No one's smart enough to do that. We couldn't get to the moon all at once, couldn't create the internet all at once. It's going to be small pieces. And maybe we can figure them out ahead of time, maybe we can't, but it's going to be broken down to parts. And that means that each part is going to be a kind of experiment. An experiment by definition means you're not 100% sure of the outcome. Even if you're super smart, you're the brightest guy, brightest team in the world, if you're doing something hard enough, you're going to fail a lot. Any leader or manager has to know that and has to come in saying, you guys are smart, let's do an experiment. We know we're going to fail in some way, but that's okay because we're planning to do a second experiment and a third and a fourth and a fifth and a 10th. There's no project or invention that was ever discovered all at once. There are always failures. And the challenge at large companies is there's a lot of ignorance about that. There's mythologies that somehow these things were invented magically. They only took a week for the right person, the right place with the right amount of money. But I've been studying this for years, and there's no single story that holds up to examination. They're all incremental. They're all accretion-based, where it means little by little, a piece is found, and then eventually becomes the thing that later on we look at as being obvious and complete. But it never felt that way or looked that way to the people who are actually doing it.
So it seems that we as managers in organizations seem to spend a lot of time trying to make the right decision. Are you suggesting that we should be doing more experimentation, using results of experimentation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're delegating. I think decision making is the wrong framework. If you have smart people, you've hired well, you have smart people who are motivated and are interested in trying to learn or develop new things, then the goal of the manager is just to define the result that's wanted. I want us to develop ideas that will get us 20% more growth. That's my objective. You're the team. You start working. What do you need from me? What structure do you need in order to get your first step going? You need no structure? You guys have, great. Hands off. My job then as a manager is to protect them. Give them space where the garden of their ideas can start to grow. And the first seedlings will be very small and very weak. And my job as a manager is to protect that. Make them feel like they don't have to answer to the entire company about the quality of those ideas. And the idea being that, like a garden, the garden metaphor is one I like very much. If you plant a whole bunch of seeds, some of them are not going to work, but you have to grow them all little by little, and then eventually you have some that are strong enough you can go to other people in the company and say, look at what we've done. And they'll say, how did you do that? You have it all at once. You go, no, I didn't. I had to make these 20 other experiments in order to get this one thing that actually paid off. So I believe that, and this is borne out by not all the stories of invention, it's borne out by many of them, of a leader who, and we talked about this in the hallway, a leader who can balance trust and control. Knowing when to give the right amount of trust to the team and when to put enough of the right decisions in place so that the end result is understood or the midway points are understood. And it's a balancing act. You have to know the threshold for the team that you have and to keep those forces in balance.
So it's more of an innovation process than it is an innovation happening, if you like.
Absolutely. I think process is kind of a, if you talk to entrepreneurs, the word process is a big company word. People don't like that word. But I agree with you in spirit that you're not thinking of singular moments, you're thinking of environments. How do we create a culture so that people naturally have the kind of output that I want as a manager? There's ideas that are bouncing around, that people are not afraid to pitch an idea, that they know that it'll be received well. Even if it doesn't have to be a good idea, they'll always have an ear for someone who will help them develop that idea. It'll be an experiment. Hey, let's try this for an hour. Okay, we'll try that. Great. Research lab mentality is really what I think most managers at corporations want, but they're usually not willing to give the amount of, not willing to delegate the amount of control necessary to create that kind of environment.
Okay, and finally, if you were talking to like a senior person in a medium-sized company, and they said, we used to be innovative, we seem to have lost our innovation drive, and trying to help them identify 2 or 3 things that they maybe would look at doing differently tomorrow than they've done today, just to make those incremental steps to kind of put some of those signals in. Can you kind of give any pointers of where they should start to work?
I think thinking of the experimental model again, by the time you're a large company, your schedules tend to get longer and longer because you have more contingencies to worry about, and that puts a lot of fear into people's decision making. So I'd say the first thing to do is make a smaller project where there's less at stake and put people on it with a simpler goal. But tell them that they have a wider range of control over the project. Instead of having to get approval from 10 VPs, they only have to get approval from 1, from me, or from some other person, but narrow the scope of control. A lot of the challenges are conflicting messages from executives and strategic goals and whatnot. It's very hard to interpret those things. I want to narrow that focus. They have a smaller schedule with fewer conflicting goals and freedom to make some mistakes. What they will create, and you pick the right people for the project as well, people who are naturally interested in trying new things and have more of an entrepreneurial spirit than the rest of the company does. You may have to hire especially for those people. They will on their own create things that are different and unique and interesting, and give you a poster child for the rest of the company to say, see how we created this thing that's actually good and different? All the things our competitors are doing that we don't seem to do anymore. They'll go, yeah, how'd you do that? You go, we use this different process. We had fewer people involved, or fewer controls. And once you have one example, it makes it easier to get the second example and the third, and on you go. And that's the only way. It's cultural change, it's anthropology. That's really the only way to do it. Small example, someone with some leadership ability shows that example, and then the example gets replicated. And then it becomes a microculture, and it grows.
And you made the comment earlier about it's not so much coming up with the idea.
No, I don't. I think ideas are easy. Ideas are the easy part. I mean, you and I could riff on 5 different ideas for companies or movies or whatever. The idea is easy. It's then how do you convert that idea into the first step and the second step and the third, and that's where I think people get confused, that there's these basic steps that you can follow of experiment, try it out. Make a sketch. Make a one-page outline of your book. Make a one-page outline of your business plan. Make a sketch of the website. And you go, and you'll find alternatives, and you develop them, and as you go, you'll get better at recognizing the failed experiments from the successful ones.